continuing through the review, we're going to have to do this projected here. We are on number 32. Number 1 through 31 was on the other video, part 1. We are in part 2. So, to copy and bisect the segment given, to copy a segment, remember, you must draw yourself a long segment, put a point on it, and then what you need to do to copy it is you must measure with your compass the length of that segment. That way you can take it over here and make an arc. Doesn't have to be huge, but I need to see the arc itself so I know that you copied it. Okay, so it's kind of maybe hard to see for you right there. Make it a little bit darker. Okay, but there you go. I copied a segment, and then the second thing that we got to do, it says, is to bisect it. Now to bisect that segment, and by the way, make it a little bolder. Okay, so now here's my copied segment. To bisect it, I need to make sure that my pencil is past halfway, and then I'm going to make an arc from this side, and then I'm going to make an arc from this side. Remember, they should overlap right here and right here. And don't forget your last step. You must connect them with a segment. That way you can see the bisector. Okay. So that's bisected. I could call this the midpoint. And that's great. So that created two segments that are what we would call congruent. Equal in their measurement, congruent in their shape. So describe the relationship between those two new parts of the segment. Very important, like I just said. I want to make a complete sentence letting me know that they are congruent, ... Okay? You must write a complete sentence, and I'm looking for the key word, that they are congruent. Alright? Then we're on the last page of the review, and we will switch back to the file over here. Okay. So on number 34, find the midpoint of the segment connecting the points 6, 4, and 3, -4. Now I'm going to flash on the screen the notes that we did for midpoint. That way we can remember how to do these. Okay, so up here at the top of these notes for midpoint distance formula, remember to find a midpoint given two endpoints, you have to add up your x's and divide by 2, add up your y's and divide by 2, like we did on number 1 through 3 on these notes in front of you. So, check it out. That's what we're going to do. So I have my x values, 6 and 3. We got 6 plus 3 in parentheses divided by 2. If I put that in my calculator using the parentheses, I get 9/2, which is the same thing. If I hit Control Enter, I get 4.5. I need to do the same thing with my y values, 4 and -4. So I'm going to add 4 plus -4 in parentheses divided by 2. And I'm going to end up getting 0. 0 is fine. But please remember, your final answer needs to be a coordinate point. Okay. It needs to be x comma y. So we have 4.5 comma 0, an ordered pair. 35 is the same idea because it just says to find the midpoint, right? So let's do it again. -7 plus 3 are my x values in parentheses divided by 0. I get -4/2, which is -2. And then my y values, 5 and -9. So I'm going to have 5 plus -9 divided by 2. I'm going to end up getting -4/2, which happens to also equal -2. Alright? So again, make sure you write your ordered pair answer. -2, comma -2. So that's if you're just finding the midpoint given two endpoints. But on number 36, it says M is the midpoint, right? So I know M is a midpoint. It says the coordinates of A, which is an endpoint, right? AB is my segment, right? So A is an endpoint. That's negative 2, 3. And then it says my midpoint M, it's 1, 0. And we are trying to find the other coordinate B, which would be the other endpoint. So just to show you on the notes when we've done this before, on the first page of these midpoint notes, on the bottom is when we did these problems. It's when you need to find the difference between the endpoint to the midpoint, and then you continue the pattern to find the other endpoint. So that's what we're going to do with a lot less space, so bear with me. I like to draw myself a segment with a midpoint, and I'm labeling what I know. I got endpoint to endpoint, and the only endpoint I know is negative 2, 3. And then the midpoint that they give us is 1, 0. And now I need to figure out the difference between the midpoint and the endpoint that was given. So to get from negative 2 up to positive 1 is plus 3. If you're not sure how to get that, you take the midpoint number, minus sign the endpoint number. 1 minus negative 2 is a positive 3. So let's look at the y values now. To get from 3 down to 0, well, that is subtracting 3. That's minus 3. If you're not sure how to get that, you just take the midpoint y value 0, subtract the endpoint value 3. 0 minus 3 gives me negative 3. So we have these differences. We must continue the pattern. So below 1, I'm going to put plus 3. Below 0, I'm going to put minus 3. And then I'm going to write my final answer after I do a little bit of math. 1 plus 3 is 4. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. So that is my final answer, 4, negative 3. So if you're given an endpoint and you're given a midpoint and they ask you to find the coordinates or find the endpoint, this is the method we've talked about. Okay, on 37, find the other endpoint given the first endpoint and a midpoint. So this is the exact same thing. Given an endpoint and a midpoint, we are looking for the other endpoint. It's phrased differently, asking the same exact thing. So once again, if I can make my points here, I'm going to use endpoint to endpoint. I'm given 2, negative 9. 2, negative 9. I'm given a midpoint of 6, negative 4. I'm going to find these differences a little bit quicker now. From 2 up to 6 is plus 4. So I'm going to add 4 again. Negative 9 up to negative 4 is adding 5. So adding 5 again. And we get our final answer. 6 plus 4 is 10. Negative 4 plus 5 is 1. So my final answer is 10, 1. Great. 38. Find the length of the line segment whose endpoints are negative 3, 4, and 5, 4. So notice this says find the length. When you see the word length, you know we're talking about distance. Okay, so that's distance. So I will show you on the notes that we did the other day what the formula is. Backside of the midpoint notes, we did distance formula notes. And there it is on the top of the page right there. D equals the square root of, parentheses, x2 minus x1, parentheses squared, plus y2 minus y1, all in parentheses, squared. So let's write this. We're going to have our distance equals and a long square root. And then I'm going to take my x2 minus x1 in parentheses. 5, always minus sign, and then my x1 is negative 3, parentheses squared. Don't forget the squareds. Plus, and then I got my y2 minus y1, so I got parentheses 4, minus sign 4, parentheses squared. What does that equal? Well, let's type it into the calculator. So, I'm going to go to my calculator, type this in. I'm going to make sure I hit on, go to a new document, don't save, add a calculator, so I get a fresh and so clean screen. So, Control X squared will give me that square root sign. Then I want to hit the parentheses, parentheses, 5, minus sign, negative sign, 3, and the parentheses squared, plus, parentheses, 4, minus sign, 4, parentheses squared. If I can type it the exact way I wrote it, I hit enter and I get my answer, which is just 8. So, the answer for distance, it's 8. Great. 39 is asking the same thing to find the distance. So length or distance, right? Those are the same thing. Between 2 points. So the letter D equals long square root x2 minus x1 parentheses squared plus y2 minus y1 parentheses squared. We're going to take that to the calculator again, and we'll get our distance between 2 points. So, Control X squared for the square root, and then parentheses 1, minus sign, negative sign, 4 parentheses squared, plus parentheses negative 2 minus negative 5 parentheses squared. I know that's a lot of negative and minus in that second parentheses, but that's correct. We did it right. Hit enter. We get 5.83. Rounded to the hundredths place. 2 decimal places to the right of the decimal. Okay. All that's great. And then on number 40, we have our unique situation where we start at an endpoint. Let's try that again. Start at an endpoint. And then they give us, goodness gracious, give us a midpoint. So we have an endpoint, we have a midpoint, but they're going to ask us for the measure of the whole length. Okay? So we talked about this in class before. I will show you on the notes. On the back page of these notes from the other day, at the bottom, we did one of these. Okay? Number 8 from the notes. Well, let's go back to the review. We know from the endpoint to the midpoint, end to middle, that is only halfway. So if I find the distance halfway, that's all right, but then I need to multiply it by 2. Otherwise, I'm not going to get the full length, which is what I'm looking for, right? So let's do the distance, multiply it by 2. So the letter D equals long square root x2 minus x1 parentheses squared plus y2 minus y1 parentheses squared. Okay? And let's take that to the calculator again so we can get our answer. Control X squared for the square root sign, parentheses, negative 3 minus 4 parentheses squared plus parentheses 1 minus 2 parentheses squared. A little faster because you're getting it, right? So we type it all in, we hit enter, and we get 7.07. And that's great. You know, that's the distance. But remember, that's only the distance of halfway. So if I go back to my calculator, I hit times 2, it'll multiply the prior answer, times 2. So really, the total length is 14.14. So I did that times 2, I got 14.14 as my distance from C to D, G to F, right? GF is 14.14. So that's the review in its entirety. Make sure you watch both parts of the review videos. That way you can get all the answers. But also study. Please study the vocab. You gotta be able to call that to mind. It's not open note on the test, so you gotta know them actually. And then study the wording of these problems to see, could I detect how to do one of these weird problems? Okay? The weirder ones give you the endpoint.